Hey guys, welcome to LinkedIn's very first speaker series session here in APAC. I wish I could be there with you, but I'm so delighted to have it happen here in our new office in Singapore. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to David Lim. David Lim is a mountaineer, a speaker about leadership, and someone who's going to inspire you. His story is going to talk about taking intelligent risks and building relationships, two things that are core to our culture and our values. I think when you're done listening to him, you'll have a better sense of how you can inspire your teams and yourself to achieve amazing objectives this year and in 2015. So once again, welcome to the LinkedIn Speaker Series hosted for the very first time here in APAC. Enjoy yourselves, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, David Lim.
Well, that was a nice introduction from Harry. Before I start, can I just say how fantastic it is to be here with you today in these brand new offices. Aren't they great? I mean, everything is so new here. Even the chairs in the conference room still have the instruction booklets on the tags attached to them. And again, a word of thanks, obviously, to the team over here who helped put all this together. Rochelle, Marianne, thank you so much. So today, before I start, I know there's a kind of a tradition here in LinkedIn where people who are new to LinkedIn sort of confess to something that's not on their LinkedIn profile and maybe share some kind of special skill they have. Is that true? Yes, there is. All right. So I'll share something that's not really on my LinkedIn profile, and that is actually I used to buy and sell wine on a professional basis at Christie's, the famous auctioneers in London. So that's a sort of unusual part of my background that not many people know about. The second thing is about skills. I know some people can do funny things like, suck spaghetti through their nose or something like that. None of that from me. But as a child, I used to love playing with other kids in terms of what we could do or what we couldn't do, especially in games involving change and coordination. So this is something I invite all of you to try. Would you like to try this with me? All right. OK, let's try this now. So put one hand on top of your head. Put one hand on your stomach. On the word go, start tapping your head and turning your hand around in a sort of like clockwise or counterclockwise direction. OK, you got that going? Are you doing? OK, ready when I say change hands. Ready? 1, 2, 3, change. Some people are tapping their stomachs. All right. Something that's a bit fun to do when you're growing up. But what's interesting is that change is always difficult. Our brains are sometimes overwhelmed with having to change direction, change what we're very used to doing. So my presentation is really today talking about change, success, and what it takes actually to lead teams and yourself to success. So I'm going to share some stories from 25 years of climbing the mountains, and hope you enjoy the journey as we go along. So a popular question I get asked is, why climb? Ask 10 climbers, you get 10 different answers. But there's one part of me that's really fascinated in knowing what I'm able or unable to do. And of course, you don't know where that line is until you fail. So if you think about it, the only way you can really get some significant success or some greatness is to push that line. And from time to time, get your butt kicked. Because you show me somebody who's never failed in anything in their life, and I'll show you an underachiever. And that's why I climb. There's some part that's fascinated in knowing, well, what am I able to do or not do? So I'll go to this particular story here that probably addresses what I call the sense of purpose that we have. And why we do what we do is just so important, isn't it? All of you are here for a specific reason. You wanted to join this organization for a specific reason. I wake up every morning, and I know why I love what I do. And part of what I do is exploring new areas, climbing virgin peaks. And this is where the cutting edge of the sport is. Climbing mountains which have never been climbed before, trying new routes in different places, And although I'm most well known for my Everest expeditions, this is where the game is really played. So about 2 years ago, we went to Qinghai in southwest China, to an area in Golmud, driving 600 miles down south to near the Tibetan border, where we go and attempt some virgin peaks, mountains which have never been climbed before, and they're there, they're just covered in cloud at the moment. And you can see is where you pack on 20 kilos of equipment, where you're completely self-sufficient for a whole week sometimes. And this is the kind of trip you do with trusted climbing partners, where there are no professional guides to help you, no porters to carry your bags, and you're working off a 30-year-old Russian map and a few pictures from Google Earth. So this is where I see the real cutting edge of sport is. It's not climbing mountains where there are 300 people on the mountain with you with satellite communications by the bucket load. To me, this is where you really find what you're made of. So here's a video clip of what it's like to climb on those mountains. Every single mountain you see here has ever been climbed. So for someone in business,
I think we are the first people.
it could be like new ventures, new territories. And as you get up to one of those virgin peaks, the wind really picks up. And right near the summit, the wind is blowing so hard, the rope between the two of you is being lifted up by the force of the wind. And yes, the wind really does sound like that. We didn't boost the volume. But for every so-called hero shot that you see was a very long journey of change. So eventually, for those who are interested, we called this unnamed mountain Sangeri, meaning lion peak in the Tibetan language. And I think at the time it was the highest virgin peak ever climbed by Southeast Asian mountaineers. But everyone likes seeing photos like that, but very few people understand that journey of change that led me to get there. Because for much of the late 2000s, I was undergoing one injury after another, until I realized that what worked for me in my preparation as a mountaineer 25 years ago doesn't really work for me now when I'm like 50. And that's when you begin to start opening your mind to changing the way you do things. So what works for, say, LinkedIn this year may not work next year. So for example, my dear wife said, go and do some Pilates, it's good for your core. So how many of you here have heard of Pilates activity? Pilates? Right, this question only for the men. This activity is done mainly by who? As women, do tough, grizzled mountaineers do Pilates? No. But then I did go in the end. And like 1 hour in the session, I'm lying on the floor covered in sweat, and I can't get up. And I'm saying to myself, Dave, you're missing something here. And that's where you begin this journey where 70% of the old is thrown out. And you begin to embrace new forms to prepare for the mountains, yoga, Pilates, high-intensity circuit training. And the result is what you see up there. So in any journey of success, it's all this difficult process of change and acceptance. And so why is change so hard? Why do we often push back change? And here's what's happening. At a neuroscience level, we push back change because we're often a little bit afraid of the unknown. Maybe we are resentful about something that we used to like, but now we can no longer experience and enjoy. So what's happening in our brains, and happens in mountaineers' brains when they climb mountains, simply this. On the left side is the amygdala. That's your part of your limbic system, and when you're stimulated with fear, and this is your fight or flee response, that part of the brain stimulates a production, a cascade of all sorts of chemicals into your bloodstream. Have you seen those newspaper articles where somebody gets punched in the face by a road bully and that person goes to jail? You've seen those newspaper articles? Yes, you know what happened there? Amygdala hijack. That person's right picture, the prefrontal cortex, the reaction part of the brain was totally hijacked by the amygdala. So when mountaineers go in the mountains, it's not that we are fearless. We're actually very afraid. It's just that we've trained our rational part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. We've trained that to actually overcome the amygdala hijack. We've trained that. And in many ways that you, sitting there, you can do it too. Because change is going to happen. Somebody's going to set for you a major goal. It could be a sales goal. It could be some kind of goal for you that looks incredibly difficult, like a Mount Everest. And then deep inside, there's fear, maybe even a bit of anger, resentment. And at a very low-key basis, what's happening is that you're succumbing to amygdala hijack. So the first of 5 points I'm trying to make today is that you can overcome this. How? Like mountaineers, this is what we do. First, think about the 90-second rule. Don't make any serious decisions 90 seconds after you had a piece of news that makes you angry, resentful, anxious, or fearful. If you have the luxury of time, 90 seconds is not a lot of time, just let all those chemicals wash through your system, and then you make a decision. That guy who punched the other fellow, I told you about, no, he didn't listen to this. Okay? So this is what the research basically in Harvard is showing us. The next thing is that take 6 deep breaths. 21,000 people went through this test. And the Journal of Hypertension research shows that when they do that, the blood pressure goes down. Their brains get oxygenated. And like mountaineers, you start making more rational decisions. So whether you're on a mountain, on a rock face, or whether you're sitting in LinkedIn, having received this bombshell of an email from Reid Hoffman, you know how to respond. And of course, the last one is this: consider your response. It's all this about stepping back and asking yourself, I'm going to respond like this. All right. Is it appropriate? Is it the right way to respond? So that's the art of stepping back requires a bit of practice. But here's 3 simple tips I can share with you that we do all the time in the mountains, and sometimes we do it subconsciously. And that's how mountaineers who are very fearful control a lot of their fear, anger, anxiety when they go climbing. I'm best known for leading the first Singapore Everest expedition in 1998. Now you've got to understand that in the early 90s, Singapore was quite a different place. Right? I mean, what's the most popular? What do you think was the most popular pastime in Singapore then, and probably still now? Eating. Thank you very much. What else? What else? Shopping. So if you say that you want to be a serious alpinist in Singapore, you kind of belong in the lunatic fringe, which is where we were. And when we announced that we're going to put a team together to go and climb Mount Everest for the very first time for Singapore, well, you imagine what the response was like. And if you take a look at this newspaper clipping, if you take a look at the top left-hand corner, it says May 10th, 1994. That was just over 20 years ago. I mean, this is when BlackBerry was still a fruit. For some of you were, I think there are a lot of very young 20-something faces out there. So you can imagine it's almost like the advertisements that Ernest Shackleton put out in 1910 when he was looking for people to join him on voyages to the Antarctica. Wanted 10 brave Singapore souls for daring adventure. Salary, none. Food, poor. Working conditions, harsh. Prospect of return, slim. Glory and success guaranteed if successful. Which Singaporean on earth is going to sign up for something like that? So you understand anything about the Asian or the Singapore psyche, this is something so totally alien to a lot of us. But when people read about the risk involved and they say, I want to join, you know they're pre-qualified. So I think that a very powerful thing amongst us is that if we find a group of people who share our workplace values, our workplace culture, and you will develop one if you haven't already in LinkedIn, guess what? You can set those people a stretch goal. Do not set stretch goals for people who do not share the same values or the same mission, because they're going to be instantly demoralized and they will likely leave after a short while. Stretch goals only work for people who have a shared sense of a mission and share those kind of values. And the stretch goal will make them dig deep. Why? It's the masala, it's the spice of uncertainty of success. That's what's going to make people want to know what is the unknown. Can they go past that? It's what makes mountaineers want to go climb mountains, even though they know that maybe success is never guaranteed. So how do we sort of hardwire the brain here? How do we hardwire the brain so that we can overcome some of the changes that we need to go through in order to get success? So this is Singapore in the early 90s. Yes, as you can see, there's no snow and ice anywhere at all in Singapore. And there's rock climbing, yes. You can climb the little hills here for fitness. The only snow and ice you'll find is the bottom of your dessert bowl. So we're a little bit challenged here. But hardwiring the brain comes with practice. So yes, you can plan on overseas trips. And then another popular question I can ask is this: Dave, how do I motivate my team? How many of you here sitting here have some kind of supervisory experience, supervisory responsibilities? A show of hands here. How many? Quite a few. All right. If you know, I get questions from a lot of people like, how do I motivate my team? And the answer is that you can't. Motivation is really intrinsic. What you can do, and what everyone here can do, and by the way, this is not the boss's job only, is that you can create an environment that motivates. What do I mean by that? In LinkedIn, for example, is there a culture of listening to people's ideas? Is there a culture of trying new things? Is there a culture of taking prudent risk? Is there a culture of celebrating little successes as you go towards the major objective? Now, if these are the things that really motivate, say, you, then this is the company to work for example. So again, you can't motivate anyone, but you can help create an environment every day at work that causes people to want to give more, do more, achieve more. Take a look at this picture. I love this picture because you can't get it anymore. It's us standing right on the edge, on top of the highest building in Singapore at the time. That was the old OUB Tower. Now I think it's called One Raffles Place or something like that. And what we would do is to put 15 kilos on our backs in a rucksack, and we'll sneak past the security, climb up the fire escape stairwell, 65 stories in this ventilation-free workout from hell. Get to the top after 30 minutes, go down and repeat the whole process again for about 3 hours. The payoff, of course, obviously is a wonderful view on top, which you can't get now because right now I think they built a swanky nightclub on top called One Altitude. And then I think after 9/11, you can't do this kind of thing anymore. So it's the environment that motivates. When we went to India in 1995, it was a very tough expedition in which I thought just that sharing a stretched vision, a goal was enough. It wasn't, because we went to India and everything began to fall apart. They had very bad weather. People on the team began to behave selfishly. And it was the first time I'd ever led a team this big. So if any of you sitting here have been technically brilliant at what you do, and now you're in charge of a team and you have this wonderful task called people management, I feel for you. Because this is what we went through. And and in the end, when we came back, we were defeated. We had 11 days in that mountain and we couldn't climb it. We came back very dejected, very angry at ourselves. And then from Leh, with about 5 days left to our flights back to Singapore, we saw this very pretty mountain. We managed to negotiate a permit to climb this mountain in a 3-day round trip. But it meant dropping all our heavy equipment and putting everything on our backs, no support whatsoever, walking to the mountains, climbing it, and coming back. The last day was an 18-hour day, which was a pretty long day for most people at altitude. And then again, when you get to the top, you realize that how do you create a winning culture? Because what we saw in the Indian expedition was not really, it was the beginning of a nascent team. So in order to create a winning culture, I believe there are 3 things. One is the environment that you help create. I talked about that. The second are SOBs. Do you know what SOBs are? Do you know what SOBs are? Do you know what SOBs are? You know what they are? No, not those. Not those kind. Maybe your office has one. Hopefully it's not you. The SOBs I'm talking about is a term borrowed from the coaching world. What SOBs are is specific observable behaviors. That means that when we are contracting, when we are talking to people in our team, instead of focusing on the very slippery things like personality, promises, intentions, opinions, we just focus on this. What are the specific, meaning that we can identify them? Observable, what we can see, behaviors. What are people actually doing that help lead the team to the goal? So when we focus on that, if we see a change or an improvement in the SOBs, guess what? We know we're getting closer to the goal. And that's how I realized in my nascent days as a leader of the Everest team, that's how I was going to get engagement with my fellow team members. Because to tell you the truth, the first Singapore Everest expedition team comprised roughly about half of the people of the team didn't like the other half. I mean, that was how it worked out. So how do we work together for success? We focus on that, the SOBs. Like, we're going up here into Camp 3, this is what we want to achieve. What do you expect of me as a leader? What SOBs do I need? And then I say, okay, you're a team member, here are the SOBs I expect of you. Do we have some disconnect, or are we on the same page? And that's how we began to really work together as a team, even though we did not really like each other sometimes. And the last one of all is very connected to that, what I just mentioned, is that what's the quality of conversations you have in LinkedIn? The fierce dialogues, again, is the term I borrow from my coaching world, are conversations which are not angry or aggressive. They're intense dialogues between two people who care a lot about something. And when you care a lot about something, guess what? A lot of the pernickety, petty personality issues begin to fade to the background. They're still there, but it fades to the background. So I think these are the three key pillars in building a winning culture in a team, and that's what I found to my benefit on Everest. So finally, after 3.5 years of raising the nearly 1 million Singapore dollars, when you think about it, all of us were working adults. There's a school teacher in the team, an analyst, a car mechanic, not exactly wealthy or well-connected people. But we raised that $1 million, or nearly $1 million. We get to Everest after training for 3.5 years, and there you have it. 8 climbers from a flat tropical city staring at this force of nature. You can't see an object that towers 10,000 feet above your head from where you're standing at some height already and not be totally humbled. That white cloud you see coming off the left there, that's not cloud. Those are billions of snow crystals being blasted off the summit at gale force winds. And there you are 10 kilometers away and the sound is like this. It's like a 747 jet at a distance. And there are 8 climbs from Singapore just looking at it. And nobody says anything for the longest time. And then some idiot says, wow, so big. Not exactly the response you might want to get as a leader, but guess what? It's great they said what they were thinking. So whenever you have got some major corporate goal and somebody thinks or says that, that's great. That means, all right, how do we break down? How do we chunk down this major task into smaller, manageable proportions? And that's what you do on Everest. Everest is not about continuous climb to the top. An Everest climb from the bottom to the top and back once you are ready in terms of your body's acclimatization to high altitude. And once all your supplies and your campsites are in position, now that whole process can take about just 6 days. But in order to get those supplies up in place, those camps up in place, you have to yo-yo up and down the mountain about 5 or 6 times. So that process takes about 6 weeks. So it takes roughly about 9 days to walk to the base of the mountain, and about 6 weeks of building up to when you get this, what we call a window of opportunity. You in the IT world know this very much. If you miss that window of opportunity, you're going to wind up as a very interesting footnote in IT history, and some companies are already there. So you've got to be decisive at moments like that. So that was climbing, getting to the grips of climbing to the mountain. So this was us in 1995 on a very difficult, fractious 1995 climb in India. Look at us, hopeless, right? Can't even get together for a group selfie. This is in 1998. Wait, let me show you again. This is in 95, 98. You notice a kind of visual difference at least? At least we know how to get together for a photo. So team building, it's a process. It's not a one-day rah-rah event. Those can help, but it's a process. So what are you doing every day at LinkedIn to work at it? Yes, and there are risks in everything we do. We can have frozen fingers. On Everest, you might not come back, for example, like this chap did not come back. We found his bones near base camp. So there's a risk in everything that we do. So how do you manage those risks as part of any business or mountain climbing challenge? The way to manage it is obviously with a sense of humor and also with prudent risk-taking. And of course, I had to show this picture because it's the most popular picture that, I get asked questions about. And how do you guys do it up there? I think astronauts get asked this question a lot too. High on a mountain, by the way, high on a mountain is a very brutal affair. You dig a hole with your ice axe, you squat over the hole, you straddle the hole, you drop your windproof pants, and you try and get your business over with as quickly as possible, because if you don't, there's often a freezing cold wind blowing up the mountain. The last thing you guys want is to have your dangly bits frostbitten. At base camp, where it's very civilized, where meals are cooked for you and you come down from time to time to rest and recover, or when the weather up on the mountain is bad, nearby we have the throne room. The throne room is a plastic barrel with rocks built around it and a staircase going up it, because all human waste has to be put into plastic barrels for disposal in appropriate places lower down the mountain. And going to the throne room is like the highlight of the day. Yes, for Singaporeans especially, the best toilet in the world. Because as you're sitting there, you realize that it's air-conditioned 24/7. And as you're looking up doing your business, no one's going to come knocking on your door to ask you to hurry up. There is no door. And as you look further to the other side, you see the most fantastic view in the world from any toilet. So why do I share these little stories and snippets about life on Everest? It's because there's a price to be paid for everything that we do, right? The fact you're here means that you aren't somewhere else. The fact that you're here means you're not working for another organization. There's an opportunity cost, isn't there? We don't go to Everest to die. It's a life, not a death wish. But we understand that this is the price we have to pay. Once we know the price, we're willing to pay the price, amazing things begin to happen. People get frustrated where they don't know the price yet. Or they know the price but not willing to pay it, but they still want the prize. These are very unfulfilled, resentful, and unhappy people. Find out what you want in life, find out the price, pay the price if you think you can. Because that's the only way you're going to get the goals that you want to get. And I shot the clip of what's it like climbing over one of those big crevasses, bottomless crevasses we have on Everest. This is shot by Justin, my friend. As you can see, it's like breathing through a straw while running a 10-mile race. He's just clipped into that little string on the right there. You can just see the carabiner on the bottom right of the picture. And the worst part about this experience is that you've got to keep smiling all the time because there's some idiot on the inside shooting video. By mid-May, all the teams were ready to go for the summit. On the summit push, at the critical point, you crack 2 ribs just under here. And you're in excruciating pain. As you lie in your tent, you suddenly realize your personal dream of climbing Everest is finished on the summit push. And you feel very depressed. And for everyone here who suffered some kind of setback, by the way, who in the audience here knows someone or has personally experienced some kind of setback in the last 6 months? Anyone? You know someone? You know someone? You know someone? All right. I was in a similar situation where one of my big life dreams was taken away. You feel very sorry for yourself, but after a few hours, after a day at rest at Camp 2, halfway up the summit push, you realize that it's not doing you any good. Then you ask yourself this wonderful coaching question, and the question is this: so Dave, what do you want now? It's because that question is a future-forwarding question. It's a question that demands an answer that can only lie in the near future. And then when you find the answer, and the answer is, I want the Singapore team to succeed, you suddenly become re-energized. You suddenly become motivated once more because you now have renewed your sense of purpose. When I began this presentation, I talked about how important it is to find out what your purpose is in life, because that's going to determine how motivated you are in getting your goals. So now my goal is no longer getting my butt up to the top of Mount Everest together with my team. Now my goal is just to focus on getting someone up there and back in one piece. That was the goal. So they went up without me. Young Edwin took my place. They got up to the point where they were 150 meters from the summit. An hour and a half of climbing at the most. And they all turned back. You see, as the lead climbers were anchoring lengths of rope into the ice and rock as they were climbing, and climbers coming behind them were clipping themselves into the rope, sort of like the insurance policy. They got to this point where they ran out of rope, and there was no more fresh rope to be found. And you couldn't disengage rope that had been positioned earlier and bring it back up. And nobody wanted to do that last section, which was really exposed, without the security of a fixed rope. Because you think about it, on some sections, you're almost like balancing on that knife-edge ridge like this, if you're climbing on the crest. And that wind picks up and blows you on the left. You're going to tumble down the left side of this photo to where my tent site is at 6,000 meters, and then I'm wondering why you're back for lunch so early. You fall off on the right side of the picture, you're going to tumble, fall, bounce, crack bones 3,000 meters down into China, Tibet. 2 things will happen. 1, when you crater below, the Chinese will be very unhappy because your visa is only good for Nepal. Number 2, you're going to be falling for such a long time before you hit anything, you're going to have time to think about things as you go down. Like, whoa, this is really going to hurt. So everyone, 40 other climbers around the world and our team, they all turned back. Right. We've all got setbacks in here. So what are the kind of questions we should ask ourselves now? Should it be, what do I want now? Or should it be some other question? And thankfully, someone in my team said, this is the first Singapore Everest expedition, we must give this a second go. And that began to lift the spirits. So you can see, you are so responsible, every one of you, in creating an environment that motivates or energizes people. It's not your boss's job to do it. I know they usually have to do it, but come on, all of you who are bosses, supervisors, managers, leaders, isn't it exhausting work to be the big person all the time? Don't you just wish sometimes someone else could be the big person in the team? And that's what it's like to be in a winning team. When that happened, we began to be motivated. I went down with my injury, reorganized the supplies, and then come back for a second attempt. So the fourth point about how do we create resilience? How do we bounce back? And within the scope of this short presentation, I'll say one sentence. It's called locus of control. The more you think that you can control certain components that's going to determine a positive outcome for you, the more resilient you're going to be. The more you think you are not in control of anything at all, that's where you begin to be desperately unhappy and not very resilient, and you won't be able to bounce back from setbacks in life. What's your locus of control? The more you think that, well, I can still control this. Well, my team is still well and alive. I can still control the logistical trail. I can still control where we can put our oxygen canisters. What we can't control, well, is the weather. Yeah, so we just wait for a bit of better weather later in the week, which we did. And so young Edwin and Sui Chow, my other team member, they went up on the night of May the 24th, and just before 6 o'clock, we heard Edwin's voice, and all he said was, I think I've reached the vertical end of the earth. And he was jumping up. We were jumping up and down with joy because we knew exactly where he was standing on top of the world. And yes, I love this picture for selfish reasons. You see the ice axe from which the Singapore flag is flying? That's my ice axe. So I didn't make it up in 1998, but my ice axe did. You see, before we left, we looked at each other's equipment, and he had a few pieces of equipment he needed that was heavier than my own. So I gave him mine, and I took his. I came down the mountain with it, and he went up to the top. You see, to this day, I have no idea whether the 1 kilo of weight saving made a difference. I don't know. He was so fit that day. But that's not the point. The point is that all of you sitting here today at LinkedIn, do you give each other all the necessary help and resources for the other person to succeed? Think about it. If you did and they win, actually in many ways, you have won too. And if everyone in your team could think like that, imagine what kind of company you could build. And that really, in short, is how a group of people who didn't like each other get to the top of the world. You come back from Singapore, all national heroes in a country that's short on national heroes, and a week later, you come down with something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS. It's a rare nerve disorder that very few of you will ever get. 1 in 100,000 will get it. 1 in 2 million for my variety. In Guillain-Barré syndrome, your immune system goes crazy, attacks your nerves, destroys your nerves, and renders you paralyzed. In my case, from eyes down, in just 3 days. This had nothing to do with the climb, all right? But happened very soon, just about a week after I came back. And so the doctors didn't know what it was. They didn't even know it was Guillain-Barré syndrome. They were still running tests. And eventually, after the 3rd day in hospital, young Justin, my best friend on the team, he comes running into the room. He says, Dave, guess what? We have found out what you've got. You've got this rare, sexy-sounding French disease. And if you die, you'll be a legend. Friends, huh? A few hours later, the doctor comes. He says, Dave, I got good news, I got bad news for you. It says the doctor. First, the good news. 85% of people recover completely. Now, the bad news. This is like the worst thing you can get and not die from. At this stage, all of you should say, ooh. So 1, 2, 3, ooh. So you're going to go through this living hell where your lungs are suctioned every 2 hours to remove the fluids which are accumulating in it. You get antibiotic-resistant pneumonia. And all the time, you can only blink your left eyelid. You're aware of everything going on, but you're in pain, but you can't speak because you're artificially ventilated. When that happens, you can't speak. The vocal cords are paralyzed because of that. So there's a slow process where they remove your white blood cells, they put donor cells in, and they just have to let the cells grow back slowly. It takes weeks and months. So what do you do in that kind of situation? In a desperate situation, what's your locus of control? Right, after about 2-3 weeks, yeah, I can move one finger and move my arm a bit. All right, get me an alphabet chart that's within my range of motion, so I can throw my arm over, and lying down a bit, I can use that one finger to point at letters to form words, to form sentences. Wow, you're communicating. Again, Roger, how about that? Great communication, much faster than somebody holding the chart in front of you and saying, David wants to say something. Right, first letter of the first word is, okay, come on, Dave, blink your eye if I reach it. And you're lying there saying, oh my God, this is going to take forever. So you understand, locus of control really dictates how resilient you are. And then you finally begin to learn how to walk again. And this took about 5 to 6 months. To get out of bed on my own steam and to walk again, that took about 6 months. Right? Then you learn how to write your name once more to feed yourself again. And of course, you don't go with Guillain-Barré quite unscathed. So I wear plastic and metal on my right leg. So on my right leg, some of you in the back can't see, I still wear plastic and metal. I don't know if the camera can capture this. Plastic and metal here on my right leg. That's right, that's my brace there. So that's because my right leg below the knee no longer works. And the left hand doesn't work very well either. And a few other bits and pieces of me don't work. And that's our permanent disabilities. Can I change that? What can I change? What can I change? I can change what I believe I can achieve. So you go through this experimental stage of new braces and truly climbing another mountain. Much harder than Everest. Much harder than Everest. So what kept me going? That sense of purpose again. Why do I do what I do? Because I love the mountains, I want to go back. So the last of the points I want to make is that when you go through this catastrophic change, in order to be successful again, you have to lose baggage. If in doubt, refer to key 1. What's the first key? Avoid amygdala hijack, right? Avoid that, avoid that. So you want to lose baggage. You don't want to resent your situation because you weren't to blame for getting Guillain-Barré syndrome. Nobody was. So why be angry? So once you start losing that kind of emotional baggage from so many things, you begin to succeed once more. And finally, we get to Aconcagua, highest mountain in North and South America, 1 year after getting out of hospital. With my disabled leg, I go with my good friend Wilfred. You can see him there. He had the 2 strong legs. I had a very experienced, I had the so-called the high mountain experience, but he had the 2 good legs. And so that's how we worked together. And he taught me so many powerful things about losing baggage, understanding I was no longer the same David Lim. And it's difficult. We hate to change. We hate to lose things we were used to. But once we lose that baggage, we begin to succeed. And then when you finally get to the grips to the mountain, when you finally get to grips with climbing the mountain, surviving exploding stoves that set your tent on fire, which is what happened in Aconcagua, and you finally get to the top of that mountain, and tears start coming down your eyes. Because you've done more than just climb a mountain, you've won your life back. And what better sense of freedom and achievement is that? And it's all because you realize that success can only happen when there's change. I never asked for this catastrophic change to happen, but change happened. And I just had to think about, well, where's my locus of control? What can I control with a leg that doesn't work below the knee? So that was 14 years ago. So here are the 5 points that I raised. Very quickly now. Find a partner. Find a partner. Oh, come on, be friendly. Turn to someone next to you. Just discuss which of those 5 points sort of resonated the most with you. Come on, don't tell each other your life story, all right? I get to do it here. Just say very quickly to you which one resonated. So find a partner. Okay, just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. Let's come. By the way, I'll be available at the back of the room later to sign any of your books that you've received. And also to answer any personal questions maybe you're a bit too shy to raise publicly. However, I hope you had an interesting discussion with your partner. But I want to share this picture. I'll show you this picture from, hang on a minute. I'll show a picture from that Qinghai climb in 2012. So there you are on the final slopes going up to a 6,000 meter peak that no human being has ever visited or climbed. And this is 2 of you in about like 50 square miles alone. The wind is blowing slightly. The ice crystals are cascading down the slopes with the sound of tiny little bells. And you got a grand view of about 20 other 6,000 meter peaks on the Qinghai mountain ranges. That was my life then. your life in LinkedIn will be facing similar kind of challenges where you go towards the unknown. What are some of those things that you think that you'll be able to apply from this presentation that's going to help you even just a teeny-weeny little bit? Because next year will be a whole new year with a lot of uncertainty. And with that, I wish you the best of luck in navigating those new virgin territories and virgin peaks in the year ahead. So if you'd like to stay in touch, yes, LinkedIn is good, FB is good, email is good. I'll leave you with this quote. You're never going to get everything you ask for. The most successful people are those who make use of everything that they already have. Thank you so much for your attention. Yes, Rachel?
So if anyone has any questions, we have a mic set up in the middle of the room.
Just Google your brain for a moment. What questions do you have?
And while we're waiting, I just want to thank you so much for coming. It's such an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm wondering if you could tell everyone what you're up to today. What are you doing now?
What, today?
In general, in life. Not the second, but yeah.
And for the next few weeks, I'll be preparing for similar presentations in Malaysia and in Macau. So that's what I do now. People think I climb 6 months a year. I used to for a time, but now I'm lucky to get 2 weeks off a year to go and do some climbing. The rest of the time, I'm working on leadership programs, speaking and engaging with audiences just like you around the world. So that's how my time is filled these days. So what questions do you have? I know that, yes, one question from up there. Yes, sir.
So thank you for this story, amazing. So what happened to your team? Did you get in touch and the first team that...
About half the team are still doing their own climbs here and there. Some of us are still climbing together. Some of us don't talk to each other anymore. And I think that's the nature of teams in which there's a life cycle. The teams will live, grow, thrive, succeed, and then they will die. And then you have to start again. And that's something that we just had to accept over the years. I hope that helps answer your question. Yes. Yes, what's your question, sir?
Hi, David. So I'm an amateur hiking enthusiast as well, so
yes.
I do enjoy your story a lot.
Yes.
And while I don't climb tall mountains like 6,000 meters or 7,000 meters, I do climb a few mountains like 3,000 to 4,000 meters.
Okay.
I actually came to know a group of friends who are actually going to climb Everest next year.
Okay.
As part of the Singapore 50th National Day celebration.
Oh, is it the Team Singapore group?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Hilvan. Yeah, I know Hilvan. I don't know the other guys so well, but I do know the leader actually. So what's your question?
I'm just wondering, like, because actually there are a bunch of very young people, people
yes.
in their early 20s to early
yes.
30s. I think everything that you shared is about leadership for as a whole. I think one of the things in organizations today is really how to lead millennials, people in Gen Y and millennials. Do you have any principles or tips to share for motivating people like us?
I think millennials, they love to be engaged. Meaning, even if you think that X is the right decision to make, don't just say, we're going to do X. Open it up to them to discuss. Because suddenly your X, when you come X plus 1 or X plus 2 because of the inputs. And you know what? You get so much more of their loyalty and attention and engagement if you open that up, a discussion like that to them, rather than just making a lot of decisions on a more executive basis. I think they really appreciate that. This is my experience for working with younger people in my own organization. I hope does that help answer your question?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Great question. What other questions do you have? I think we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Yes.
Hi, David. So actually, my question is regarding to everyone who's in this room who's actually not leading a team but being led.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's really meaningful what you've said for those who are in charge of a team or
yes.
that are about to lead a team.
Yes.
But what about those who are following a team? What
yes.
can we do to enhance them to do better as a leaders and to be led much better?
For those people, I would encourage those people to understand that they too are responsible for creating an environment that motivates. Remember I said, it's not just the leader's job. It's every single person's job. The second thing too is that, like it's what happened in Everest in '98. That encourage people to a point where at some stages, somebody can stand up and say, okay, this thing has happened. I'm taking charge of this. Is that okay? You want to encourage them to take leadership moments, leadership opportunities, and see how that goes. But unfortunately, the risk obviously is that sometimes They may fail, or they may be unsuccessful, and this is all part of the cycle of learning and becoming better. Like I said, if they don't fail at anything, they never really know how great they could have been. Does that help answer your question? Thank you very much. One last question from the lady over there.
Hi, David. Thank you so much for the talk. Fortunately, at LinkedIn, the hiring process is great, and we actually hire mostly great people, but there are organizations we work with that have bad hires. So as you look at a team and leading a team,
yes.
What is the point that you give up on somebody?
All right.
And at what point do you keep working with them to, make them better or just make it work?
Okay. There are 3 paths to address that issue. One is that it can be solved. The problem you're encountering with this particular person could be solved if 1, you leave the organization, then your problem's over. 2, they leave the organization, and then it's over. The third one is that if all the coaching in the world and counseling doesn't work, you fire them if you're in that position. Then the problem's over too. The problems, I think, that most leaders fail to take the third option often enough. They wait and wait and wait until that person becomes a toxic influence in the whole team, and everyone feels really bad about it. And then maybe they leave, or luckily then they may get fired. So I'm not encouraging a hire and fire policy, but you need to have total clarity of at what stage that person needs to go and be told to go. And sometimes that can be worked up through a structured series of coaching, mentoring, counseling, but you need to draw a line when, okay, all this hasn't worked. I think you're better off in another organization. Somebody has got to have that fierce dialogue sooner rather than later. Does that help answer your question? All right, great stuff. And Rachel, do we have any more time for questions? We do, great. Which one? Yes. Yes, this gentleman here. And after that, that gentleman with that great handlebar.
Just following up on Virginia, I mean,
yes.
It's easier said than done, but when you're in Everest and when you have someone who's not following you or
yes.
not listening to your instructions,
yes.
every person has a role.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, how do you let someone go? Or how do you tell someone, hey, you know what, this is not working out from a team perspective? And you can't let them go because they have a specific job, which is to help everybody go
mm-hmm.
to the peak.
All right.
How do you draw a line of distinction at that point?
In a kind of national expedition that we had, we made sure that would never happen, because before we even leave Singapore to go to the mountain, we would have sorted out those kind of people already. That's the first thing I would say to you. Second, that kind of situation tends to arrive is in these commercial expeditions where people have paid a professional mountain guide to organize it. They paid 60, 70,000 US, and let's say they aren't able to climb it, but they still insist on going. That's where the contractual part must be watertight, that basically the guide calls the shots. All right, and my friends are mountain guides, and they've called that number many times and basically fired a client from the team for that client's own safety and for the team's safety reasons. That's never easy to do, but like I said, if you're in that position on a mountain, you haven't prepared yourself very well. You should never be in that position on a mountain. Hope that answers your question. Yes, sir.
Hey, David. So you've dropped all kinds of little nuggets on us today. A lot of it's really inspiring. I'd be curious to know if there's any advice you've received along the course of your life that's really resonated with you and stuck with you that you haven't highlighted here that you'd want to share with us today. 2
pieces of advice I got was excellent. One was somebody who led the British Annapurna expedition in 1970, and he happened to be my base camp manager in 1998. Scottish guy who used to lead who was the second in command of the Special Air Service Regiment. So this is a gentleman who knows a lot about leadership, and he said that if in doubt, don't. Let me repeat that. If in doubt, don't. That means that they say you want to promote somebody because he's a brilliant, technician at something, but you have some doubts about his ability to lead or to manage other people. The advice is, if in doubt, don't. Because once you do that thing, once you promote that person, once you give this person this job, it's very hard to take it back away from them, again, without causing a lot of disruption. So if in doubt, don't. The second great piece of advice I've been given is this, and it applies to many things. Buy the best you can possibly afford. I'm not saying to make yourself bankrupt in buying some new toy, but if you're in a situation where you're buying mission-critical equipment for your project, your business, a mountain climb, try and buy the best you can possibly afford, because halfway up the mountain is not where you suddenly realize the meaning of quality. And I've seen things go kaput on the mountain because somebody wanted to save $50 or $20 here on something like that. And you don't want a $100,000 expedition. You spend a whole year planning to go bust because you wanted to save on $20 item of something or the other. That's the second piece of advice I've had. Great questions there. And so I want to be respectful for your time. And so
we want to be respectful of you as well, Dave.
Yes, Roger.
So thank you so much for such an inspiring talk. And it's not a surprise because for a man who's had several firsts, right? The first to lead the Singapore expedition to the Everest, the first Southeast Asian team to ascend Aconcagua. But it is definitely inspiring, and we've, as Drew said, we picked out a lot of nuggets. But for me, what really resonated was, we first need to control ourselves, or our, what do you call it, amygdala.
Yes, don't let your amygdala hijack your brain.
Right, and listen. Listen to your trusted ones, your friends, and in your case, your wife told you to change the way you prepare by doing Pilates. And then,
look, as adults, we do two things badly: changing and learning, right? Ironically, as adults. So
and then preparation, and then I think for me, most important is really, understand the locus of control, and support each other on your way up.
You've been paying attention, Roger.
I have. I've been taking copious notes for those of you who want a copy. Before we kind of wrap up, I also wanted to thank our colleague, Steve McClung from the San Francisco office. It's a great example of how relationships matter. So Steve connected us to David, and I think we will have to follow up with you on details on how he performed on those expeditions he helped out with. So they met in 2001 in Singapore, where Steve was helping Dave with one of his expeditions to the Everest, and Steve was completely blown away. He's still around. I was blown away by how the team, looked out for each other on the way up, and he connected us, and I'm so glad for that. Lastly, a quick plug for LinkedIn Speaker Series. If you were inspired by this session, which I'm sure you are, there are more of it online at hang on. Yes, of course, speakers.linkedin.com, and it's all also available on iTunes. Just look for the podcast. So without holding up everyone's time, let's give a proper round of applause for Dave. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.